guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Stacy. This is going to be my April reading wrap up. I have a different background today because we are currently in our Tennessee house, and so I'm filming there and I don't have my tripod. So you guys are balanced on a bunch of things right now. Yeah, April. April was a pretty good month for me. I read 7 books. I read all kinds of genres, so I'm happy with that. Let's just jump into it. The first book I read was As It Was in the Days of Noah by Jeff Kinley. I gave this book 4 stars, and I'm sad to say I honestly don't have many memories of it because it was the first book I read in April and my memory stinks. I really should film right after I finish a book. I should give updates right away because I just cannot remember. But if I gave it 4 stars, it must have been pretty good. What I do remember of it is it walked you through what life was like on the planet, like the whole planet at the time of Noah, and the kinds of people and circumstances that he was dealing with. Talked about his faith and how people probably treated him while he was building the ark. So if you're interested in what life would have looked like for Noah and how that would relate to us today, like in the sense of how we are not supposed to be of the world and how we're supposed to be separate and different and holy, all that stuff, I would recommend it. The next book I read was The Thief by Stephanie Lansom. I gave this one 5 stars. Not surprised that I love this book because this is the 3rd of hers in this trilogy that I read, and I adored the first 2 books. She is such a fantastic writer. It is biblical fiction. It takes place around the time of Jesus's crucifixion, and that is written into this book. And it is about a thief. There's so much of this book. See, the way she writes is she gives you little like tidbits throughout the book, and it builds. And then at the end, you're like, oh, that was this guy, or that was this situation. And you have all these connections to biblical things and biblical people. And so I don't want to give anything away. Almost anything I say about it could be a spoiler. If you read any biblical fiction, please read the series by Stephanie Lansom. They are all so good. I don't know if I have a favorite. That would be hard to decide. So anyway, moving on. The 3rd book that I read was called Closed Casket by Sophie Hannah. This one I gave 4 stars. And this is Sophie Hannah kind of writing as Agatha Christie or for the Agatha Christie estate. I'm not really sure how that works, but she writes Agatha Christie stories, and she uses her characters, like Poirot was in this book, and I thought she did a fantastic job. I think this is book 2 in the series. I think there are 4 books so far. I will definitely read the other books in this series. I think the dialogue was spot on for these types of characters and for this time period. I think this is probably like the 1930s or 40s, but it was, is it called Closed Room? It's one of those murder mysteries where it's somebody that was in the house. There's a name for that. Is it Closed Room? But it was so well done. If you like Agatha Christie, if you're looking for a good mystery book, read that. The 4th one I read is Claudia, Life of Pontius Pilate. That is another biblical fiction book. And I read that right at like the week of Easter because this, has the crucifixion in it also. I was trying to find biblical fiction that takes place during that time period. This one I gave 3.5 stars. It was well done, but I feel like a lot of liberty was taken with this story. There's a whole lot that we don't know about Pontius Pilate. There isn't much written about him or his wife. And so I was trying to do some research on my own, trying to figure out how accurate the book is. And I just feel like a lot of liberty was taken, which is okay, but I don't know if me doing the research at the same time as reading the book was a great idea, because as I was looking stuff up, I just felt like it lost its believability for me, if that makes any sense. But it was well written. It does explain a lot of things from that time period, and I love historical fiction. So it was an okay book. It wasn't my favorite biblical fiction, but it was good. The fifth book I read, oh boy, I have a lot of thoughts on this one. I actually filmed a video for this book. Just a one book video review type thing. And I watched it many times back after I filmed it. And I was like, I don't know if I want to post this or not. I feel like I got maybe a little bit too personal in it. And so, how do I talk about this one? All right, this one, guys. This one is The Souls of Lost Lake by Jamie J. Wright. I gave this one 2 stars. I am the only person on the planet that did not love this book. So, take my opinion with a grain of salt. Everyone else who's read this book loves it. Jamie J. Wright is a really good author. She has a lot of books. People love her books. I've liked her books. I'm not the biggest fan of her books because I don't love dual timeline, and she does dual timeline in every book. But I like her books okay. This one, I did not. So how much do I want to say here? So, okay. Let me see if I can summarize what I had said in my kind of ranty video. So, this book, I'm going to say, I think, this is my opinion. And I know it's just my opinion because nobody else feels this way, and that's okay. This book is by far her scariest book. She generally writes creepy books. And like I said, I've liked her books, but they definitely were not on the same horror factor as this book. I am categorizing this book as a horror book, horror Christian book. I think it's supposed to be listed as romantic suspense or something like that. And I'm like, no, this is horror. And I say that because you guys know, I've talked about this a million times. I have read a lot of horror. I was deep into the horror world. And based off of my background with horror, this book is right up there. It is one of the scariest books I've ever read. There are a lot of horror books, books that are in the horror genre that I've read that are on the top 5 scariest horror books of all times. And I've read them and I was not scared at all. And I was thinking to myself, why is this book even on this list? This book could go on that list. It's very graphic. Scenes are described like murder scenes with an axe, with stabbing, with strangulation, kidnappings. These things are described in great detail, so much so I could vividly imagine what's happening in my head. And my main issue with the book is I have a huge problem with horror now. It is something I am deeply convicted about because of my background. I'm like an alcoholic who is now convicted to stay away from alcohol, and so I have no business going into a bar. So, for me, that's what horror is like for me. So I'm not going to say it's all horror. It's certain kinds of horror. And for me, the type of horror I need to avoid, I need to personally stay away from, is this kind of slasher horror. This book is slasher horror, okay? So when I first started reading this book and these slasher scenes were taking place, I started thinking, wow, this book is great. I love this book. This is an awesome book. But the reason I was feeling that way wasn't because of the content, the characters, the plot line, none of that. I was thinking it was an awesome book because of the slasher stuff, the stuff that I need to be running far away from. Yeah, I have no business reading that stuff because I like it. I have become very desensitized to a lot of this sort of material over the years because of the stuff that I've read and seen. And I would say that Jamie Jo Wright writes these scenes, slasher scenes, in such a way to where for a person like me, it gets exciting. I don't know if that's the correct word. I don't want to sound like a psychopath either. This is really hard because I feel like I'm sounding like I'm crazy or a murderer. I'm not. I'm not. But we all have our things. We all have our sins. Like, it's not just me. We all have our things of stuff that we are drawn to, attracted to, stuff that is bad for us that we are supposed to be avoiding. And this book contains so much of that stuff for me. So I'm not saying that this isn't a good book. I'm not saying you shouldn't read this book. I feel like I'm going to get backlash from this. I'm not saying any of those things. I'm saying for me personally, this is not something I should be reading. So also, I wanted to add, for me personally, the faith content was just not there in this book. It was very light. So if I'm going to put myself in a situation where I'm reading a more horrific type of story, it's got to be like the scale, the faith horror scale has to be much bigger on the faith side. There has to be a much higher amount of faith content in there to make the horror stuff work for me or make sense for me. It has to cancel the horror out. And for me, this book did not do that. Okay, so yeah, I feel like this was long, but it was way shorter than that video that I had filmed because that was like 16 minutes long. So, all right, moving on. The next book that I read was The Princess and the Goblin, which was so sweet and so lovely. I want to thank Holly because she mentions this book quite often. I think it's one of her favorites. That's the reason why I picked it up, because this is Christian fantasy and I love the Lord of the Rings trilogy, so that's why I read this. This was a short, sweet read about a princess and her grandmother, who I think is supposed to be like an allegory for Jesus. Because the book is so short, there's not a whole lot I can say about it other than if you like Lord of the Rings or you like fantasy, give it a try because it was just adorable. The next one, it's the last book, is The Bone House by Stephen Lawhead. This one I gave 5 stars. The Bone House is book 3. Wait, is it? The Bone House is book 2? I want to say it's book 2. In the Bright Empire series, there's not a whole lot I can say about each individual book for the series because I don't want to give away spoilers, but the characters are so great. The storyline, there's so much adventure. They're like every chapter you're following kind of a different person and they're in a different place and there's a different like quest kind of thing going on. And so it is not boring at all. I feel like the whole time I'm reading it, I'm so engaged in what is happening. And I'm just like turning the pages, like what's going to happen next and whose storyline are we following next? I feel like you have to kind of be paying attention to these books though. You could kind of get lost a little bit because there are a lot of characters and there's a lot of moving pieces to this. But if you like time travel, dimensional type stuff, adventure stuff, definitely read these books. It is Christian. It's kind of light on Christian stuff, but there are Christian characters and Christian things do get talked about. But it's not scary at all. I thought it was going to kind of be scary going into it because the first book was called The Skin Map. And I'm like, ooh, what's the skin map? But it's not scary at all. It's just a very good, wild adventure story. Adventure, sci-fi, time travel. Anyway, those are the books that I've read for the month of April. I hope you guys had a great month and you have a great May, and I will see y'all soon. Bye.